What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. We have some very interesting news coming straight from Raptors head coach Nick Nurse, potentially highlighting that there may be some changes regarding the starting lineup. Now, I know there's been a lot of questions surrounding the Raptors starting five. We know they're going with the switchability lineup of 6'8", 6'9" guys, but there's been a lot of questions about whether the Raptors need a starting legitimate center, whether Gary Trent Jr. is best suited to be the sixth man, and whether Precious should be starting. Well, all of your questions will be answered in today's video, but I want to highlight what Nick Nurse did state here. I'm not going to read the entire thing. There's quite a bit to read there, but I'll highlight the key points, which essentially he said that just because you have the best five doesn't mean that they'll always be starting, kind of hinting at a change because we saw last season with Pascal, Scotty, OG, Gary, and Fred starting at the starting five, and obviously a lot of questions did arise. And he also went on to say that he does not really want Scotty, Pascal, OG guarding really good fives to start the game. And he also went on to say that maybe 3-4 minutes into the game, he'll get some of those guys in the starting lineup. Now, obviously, this could be a huge change from what we saw with the Raptors last year. So for today's video, I'm going to be going through some lineups that we saw last year, highlight a few key points regarding Pascal, or I should say, Precious Achiuwa and Gary Trent Jr., and ultimately give you a couple of players who I think they could potentially insert into the starting lineup. So if you're ready to watch this video, guys, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Let's try to get these likes a little bit up, guys. Let's show a little bit more support. These YouTube videos do take a little bit while to make, so let's try to get this video to 100 likes. And if you want to join a fun community, which is always fun and engaging in the comment section, and a YouTuber who actually reads your comments, then you need to hit the subscribe button as well. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel, and for today's video, the shout out goes out to yet again Todd Stevens. So Todd, thank you so much for supporting this channel through your likes and comments. It is very much appreciated. Now let's quickly show you guys the 5 most used lineups with the Raptors starting lineups last season, and I wanted to highlight a few key points for you guys. Now, we know the Raptors had a lot of injuries which led to a lot of different guys becoming part of that starting lineup. Now, there's a few points I did want to highlight. Now, when you take a look at the starting 5 lineups, obviously we saw a bunch of Pascal, Fred, OG, Gary, and Scotty Barnes. But one thing to highlight, which kind of goes with what Nick Nurse was saying, was just because your 5 best players are there doesn't necessarily they'll be starting. And I say this because when you take a look at the offensive ratings here highlighted, although those 5 guys were arguably the best players on the Raptors, the best starting 5, you look at the offensive rating, that was actually one of the lowest amongst the 5 most used lineups last season with an offensive rating of 107.4. So again, there's a lot of questions about whether the Raptors need a starting 5. Let's talk first, most importantly, about Gary Trent Jr. Now, outside of those starting 5 lineups, there were quite a few mixes and matches the Raptors used last season. I wanted to show some of the other lineups as well, and as well as talk about Gary Trent Jr. because he seems like the obvious choice to move to the bench in favor of potentially maybe a starting center. But there are a few key points we do need to take into consideration. I just want to point out, guys, this is going to be a fun, open discussion. I'm not really using these statistics to persuade an idea or really go a certain way. I'm totally open to all sorts of discussions, and this is what the video is about. It's going to be open, engaging, thoughtful conversations. And when we talk about Gary Trent Jr. moving to the bench, I wanted to highlight a few key points here. As you see there, now some of the most highest rated offensive ratings through the lineups you see on the screen here have been ones that include Gary Trent Jr. So although obviously there's questions around Gary Trent Jr.'s defense, there's absolutely no denying that the Raptors offense is much better with him than without him in the lineup. In fact, when you take a look at those circles that are highlighted in red, those are the lineups that are highest rated offensively that contain Gary Trent Jr. And the ones that are circled in black, those are the ones that are some of the lowest ranked offensive ratings. And it's no coincidence that, of course, Gary Trent Jr. was not included in those lineups. So although it may seem like Gary Trent Jr. out of the starting 5 might be the easiest to move to the bench, the Raptors do lose quite a bit of offense. Sure, their defense gets a little bit better, but they're losing a lot of shooting and they're losing a lot of the offense that Gary Trent Jr. provides. Now let's talk about Precious Achiuwa as well, because there's obviously these 2 players that are involved in talks about Gary Trent Jr. being moved to the bench and then Precious Achiuwa being inserted into the starting lineup. Now, when we talk about Precious Achiuwa, you take a look at this chart here, and again, I wanted to highlight some of Precious Achiuwa's key points as well, because some of the best defensive ratings on these lineups that you see here are no coincidence: 100.7, 100.8, 103.1, And what is the things that you see here? All of these starting lineups with the best defensive rating contain Precious Achiuwa in the starting lineup. Now, it's kind of ironic I do say that because a lot of those starting lineups do contain Gary Trent Jr. as well. So again, you could kind of see that as it is. There's obviously a lot of variable factors going into that. And sorry guys, I did want to apologize. This is not the starting five. This is the starting four guys that have played together a lot in a lot of the games last season as you take a look. So again, there's a few factors that you can take into consideration, like the fifth man not playing, but some of the four players that have played together, again, Precious Achiuwa was one of the best defensive ratings, and he made the defense so much better in the starting lineup. Now, obviously, you lose some offense when you move Gary Trent Jr. to the bench, and you gain a little bit more size, you gain a little bit more defense. Your rebounding gets a lot better too. Now, I want to leave this conversation completely open because ultimately I will give you my final verdict at the end of this video. But let's talk about certain guys that can be moved to the bench and some that can be moved into the starting lineup. Now, one player that really comes to mind that maybe not a lot of people may be thinking of, and shout out to Kenyon, I believe. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Good friend of mine that I've been having conversations with about who could potentially be in the starting lineup. Now, he actually mentioned Otto Porter Jr., which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because when you're talking about inserting someone into the starting lineup, the main concern is, are they going to be a good three-point shooter, which Otto Porter Jr. is? And I think he provides a lot more size. Not I think, I know for sure he provides a lot more size than Gary Trent Jr. is listed at about 6'4", 6'5". Otto Porter is about 6'7", 6'8", I believe. So he provides a little bit more size at the shooting guard position. And you know what? Even if you want to play him at the small forward position, you can have Scotty Barnes playing the shooting guard or even have OG there. So he provides a little bit more size. And this is one point I really want to highlight, which I've highlighted in a video a while ago, was defined roles. And by inserting Otto Porter Jr. into the starting lineup, what you do is you have a player who doesn't play selfish, who knows his role, who's going to let the dogs eat, which is most important because he's going to let guys like Pascal, Scotty, Fred, and OG eat, and he'll be okay with being the fifth option. Well, not to say that Gary Trent isn't okay being the fifth option, but oftentimes you see Gary really just chucking the ball quite a bit sometimes, and that leads to turnovers. That leads to not a good rhythm of flow on the offensive side. So I think having someone like an Otto Porter Jr., not that I'm comparing him, think of someone like a Danny Green when we had him in our starting lineup. He's someone who knows his role. He's not going to demand too many shots, and he's going to increase, actually, this is going to let some of the other guys be more involved in the offense. So this works great for both sides. I think, I know it's a little bit tough to see Gary Trent Jr. go to the bench, especially in a contract year, but Otto Porter, you do have the defense, you have more rebounding, and you don't lose the three-point shooting, which is so important because when you do have Precious Achiuwa, as good as the defensive ratings happen, guys, let's be honest, his three-point shooting isn't on par with Gary Trent Jr. Otto Porter Jr. is fairly close. His shooting is up there. He's a really good three-point shooter. So that is just one player that comes to my mind when we talk about inserting different guys. Now, again, based off of what Nick Nurse did say, he didn't want Scotty, OG, or Pascal guarding the starting or guarding a talented five. You would realistically think the next name that comes to mind has to be someone like a Christian Koloko. Now, although his offense needs quite a bit of work, I think that would be an understatement. He's missing a lot of shots, even in the paint when he's going for hook shots. He is still a really talented defensive player, and he provides a little bit more size than someone like a Precious Achiuwa. He has the ability to really block shots. I know that's not what all defense is about, but that rim protection would be so big for the Toronto Raptors. And having someone like a Christian Koloko, of course, your offense is going to suffer a little bit, but just a couple minutes just to start the game, just to bang in with guys like Miles Turner, I think just creates so much more size. You get a little bit more rebounding having Gary Trent Jr. going to the bench. And ultimately, I think you get a lot of rim protection. It just changes the way that other teams also attack the basket, which is such a key important because we know the Raptors scrambled quite a bit last season. As talented and as great as that sound in theory about having these switchable defenders, they did lose a lot of rim protection having these five guys in the starting lineup, but inserting Christian Koloko would prevent that. And also just the way the other teams attack the basket. And of course, besides that, you obviously have Precious Achiuwa, who again, I would think would be an absolute amazing starter with the Raptors. The only question regarding Precious Achiuwa, like I said, his defense would be great. The Raptors defensive rating obviously is a lot better with him in the starting lineup. But the only issue is, again, floor spacing. So if you're not, let's say for a moment, you're not moving Gary Trent Jr. to the bench, who realistically are you moving? I just don't see OG moving there because it doesn't really benefit him moving to the bench. It's not like OG Anunoby is all of a sudden going to become a lot more aggressive and start taking more shots when he's on the bench. So again, you can make that argument that maybe he gets more of an offensive role with the bench guys. I just don't see that being a good look. And of course, Fred VanVleet is the point guard. He is that three-point specialist we also need. He's also a good defensive player as well. So I don't think he's clearly not being moved, and neither are Pascal and Scotty. So more and more, it looks like Gary Trent Jr. is probably one of the few players that could be moved to the bench. So I just don't see any other players being moved. But again, Precious Achiuwa definitely could be an interesting option, as well as Christian Koloko. Again, the only issue with inserting those guys as your center is good. You get your defense, but the offense is going to suffer a little bit. I think the floor spacing is going to be a little bit tough, especially for guys like Pascal and Scotty who love to attack the basket. Now you all of a sudden have three guys who get majority of their points within close to the rim anyways, with Precious Achiuwa and even Christian Koloko being there. So again, those are just some of the questions. You could potentially, one more name I do want to quickly throw out there, guys, is someone maybe like a Chris Boucher. It could be very interesting having him in the starting lineup. The only issue I will say is he doesn't provide size. So he's not very different from having someone like a Scotty or Pascal. You could even make the argument that he's a little bit weaker than some of those guys. So it's not going to really benefit guys like Scotty or Pascal when you have guys like Chris Boucher guarding the opposing center player, because he's going to get bullied as well. So again, he would be interesting being a really good three-point specialist. You would get a little bit more rim protection and size. And of course, rebounding as well. Again, the only thing is that he's not strong enough to guard centers. We know that. But again, it'll be an interesting topic heading into the season opener. And I think we may see something similar like last season, where we didn't see Gary Trent Jr. in the starting lineup. Now, I do want to ask you guys for your thoughts. Do you see Gary Trent Jr. being moved to the bench? Do you potentially see someone else, maybe OG, maybe Fred VanVleet being moved to the bench, maybe even Scotty Barnes? Who do you see being moved to the bench, and who would you like to see in the starting lineup? I do want to ask you guys for your thoughts, so make sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and that will be it for today's video, guys. And before I end it off, I do forget, I did have a trivia question for you today. And the trivia question for today's video is, which Raptors player has the highest field goal percentage in the preseason? Is it A, Pascal Siakam? Is it B, Scotty Barnes? Is it C, Christian Koloko? Or is it B, Delano Banton? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. It's about 2 a.m. guys. I do apologize. I'm trying to end the video early, but that will be it for today's video, guys, for real. And I hope you guys have yourselves a really nice day.